But I have also worked in different environments. I lived in and worked in Honduras, in Central America, where I encountered communities affected by extreme violence, gangs, and very complex forms of victimization. That experience changed me. Um, I think that like six or 7 years ago, I conducted a study based on life stories of adolescents involved in gangs, young men and women with very serious offending histories and extremely complex experience of victimization. During that research, I interviewed a young woman who was incarcerated and had been involved in contract killing.
Wow.
She told me one of the most painful stories I have ever heard. I remember leaving that interview thinking that she was probably one of the most difficult cases I had encountered in my entire career. She was profoundly depressed with an extremely complex history of trauma and violence. I never forget her. About 5 years later, I returned to Honduras to work on violence prevention projects with civil society organizations. Many of these organizations were community on or faith-based organizations that were trained to professionalize their interventions. So I trained them. We work with them on motivational interview, mentoring skills, and other evidence-informed intervention practices. One of these organizations told us they wanted to present us a successful story so that we could analyze what had worked. I walked into the room, and the success story was the same young woman I had interviewed 5 years earlier.
Wow, you're kidding me.
No,
How amazing.
that was an extraordinary moment for me because the person I had once thought represent one of the most difficult
Yeah.
cases I had ever encountered was now standing in front of me as an example of successful change. She taught me more about resilience, trauma, identity transformation, and the system that many books could.
Right.
Above all, she reinforced a conviction that has become central to my work. Change is always possible. Resistance is always possible. Of course, it does not depend only on the individual will. People need opportunities, relationships, resources, support, and communities that allow a different identity to become possible. But the most important thing is that change is possible. Even in the most painful stories or contexts, change is always a possibility. I think there is a broader lesson here about Latin America. If we can take the principles of implementation science and use them to implement evidence-based informed practices in contexts with serious resources limitation, institutional barriers, violence, and instability, that we have something important to contribute internationally. Because working in Latin America constantly forces us to think creatively. We cannot wait to perfect conditions. We have to identify what is essential, use the resource we actually have, understanding barriers very precisely, and develop alternative ways to overcome the barriers. That requires resilience,
Hmm.
but it also requires divergent thinking. And I think that um, that is an opportunity to really prove that these implementation frameworks, these base evidence practices can be really helpful for people and for organizations. So I think that Latin America has accumulated an enormous amount of knowledge about implementing under adversity. We have lessons learned, good practices, failures, adaptation, and innovation that deserve much greater international attention.